Daniel Defense has a PCC now. They announced it at the 2024 SHOT Show, but it's become available roughly a year later. So here's what you want to know about it. This is the 16-inch version of the gun. It also comes in an SBR or a short-barreled pistol variety, but this is the 16-inch variety that you would want to use for shooting sports and all that kind of stuff. So there's plenty of stuff you're going to want to know about it. There's a couple drawbacks, and we'll get to those. And for those of you who are not familiar with me, my name's David. I do competition pistol shooting a lot. But this off-season, I've been kicking around in PCC using my Sig Sauer MPX. And then recently, Daniel Defense sent this in for me to take a look at, so now I can tell you about that now. Now, you may have noticed that we're talking about long guns, and I do have a beard, but I am not the typical, you need to get out and train, I've got a beard guy on YouTube. There's plenty of those guys out there. You should watch those guys. But if it helps you listen to what I'm saying, if you want to pretend like I'm one of those guys, you're welcome to do so. I'm wearing a bluey shirt, but I am a pretty okay competition pistol shooter, and that's really the angle that there is to look at with this 16-inch variant, because 16 inches means that you don't have to ask the ATF to travel across state lines to shoot matches with your own personal legally owned property. Who thought that was a good idea? I think that this is aimed at that market, whereas the shorter barreled ones are likely aimed at the martial sort of self-defense stuff. So we're going to look at everything as it is evaluated through a competitive lens. And those of you who consume a bunch of gun content are probably already aware, but if you're not, this is a direct blowback AR style PCC with fully symmetrical ambi, mind you, controls. We'll come back to that. I learned a ton about blowback PCCs as I was screwing around with this thing. Now, it's not just a plain Jane blowback. There is a hydraulically dampened buffer in the buffer tube there. It's the Kinshot RB5015 HD, which is basically, I mean, it kind of looks like a weird like detonator or something like that. And it does improve how the pistol shoots, but just like all PCCs with a blowback action, it's got a super heavy bolt and buffer system. One thing that Daniel Defense did do with it is it comes with a CZ Scorpion mag. That's right, it takes the SMG style magazine as found on the CZ Scorpion. Interesting fact right now, if you were to try and go buy Scorpion mags, you can't buy them as manufactured by CZ, at least when I was looking and making this video. I was able to get several of these Magpul Scorpion mags, which take about 3 dozen pews, but that's pretty awesome. That's not quite enough capacity for USPSA, although I suspect you can miss steel at an appropriate speed for IDPA with those. But if you want to miss steel at the appropriate speed, you'll probably be looking into these. And they just look super cool. I mean, like, look at that. And one thing that is kind of cool about this gun is the first thing you're going to notice when you're pressing the mag release buttons on the gun is that it doesn't feel like a typical, like, I press the bar, it kind of moves the notch in line with the magazine and the magazine drops free. That's because CZ Scorpion magazines, at least the Gen 1s, were a paddle release. And the Daniel Defense mag catch is designed to take either the Gen 1 or Gen 2 Scorpion mags, and the button isn't just moving to the side to allow the magazine to drop free, it's actually actuating a paddle which allows the magazine to drop free. So it is a button push paddle release, which is kind of cool, in pretty much the same spot that you would want it for as an AR. The controls are super AR reminiscent. But with that mag catch is also the bolt catch at the front. So there is a steel wall bolt catch coming up from the magazine release, and it is a module. So if the bolt catch were to go, you can swap out the whole module, although they beefed up the bolt catch, so it's not likely to fail. The receiver set is a little bit shorter, at least the lower receiver is, and that actually is kind of nice. The receiver being short and the heavy bolt moves all the weight to the back of the rifle, so when you're swinging it around, it feels really great. Like, the rifle handles really, really well. The handguard at the front end has about 1 million M-LOK slots, but it's also kind of low profile and just feels really, really good. The furniture that comes on it is the Daniel Defense furniture, which is fairly polarizing as I understand, but I think it's pretty awesome. It doesn't take away beard hair when you're shooting, which is the important bit. And I find that I personally really like the Daniel Defense furniture. The shape of the handguard and the stock, I just found myself liking this more than the MPX from just a gun handling perspective. Now, the gun isn't light at its bare weight. It's about 7 pounds, which is about what an MPX weighs. Just a blowback PCC is going to be a little bit heavy, and so there it is. The magwell on the receiver, as you can see there, is flared sort of nicely, but it's not really, you know, a competition magwell. And one thing you're going to need with a SMG magazine where you're putting like a rectangle into a slightly larger rectangle is you're going to want the margin of error. You can see just right there, even doing low speed, I screwed that up. You're going to want a bolt-on magwell for competition purposes. As you can imagine, because the rifle is just coming out now, there are no magwell options available yet. The safety is a 90-degree throw, and it is a large, oversized safety, and I actually really like how it's situated. I would prefer a 45-degree safety, but honestly, that's not really bad. Actually, I quite like it. The other thing that's really important in a PCC for competition is the charging handle, because unloaded starts are a thing. The charging handle that Daniel Defense uses, it is their charging handle, is absolutely fantastic. I feel no need to send the folks at Radiant Weapons my money because it's a great charging handle. And one thing that the fully symmetrical thing gets you as a right-handed shooter is the ability to lock the bolt to the rear with the release catch kind of thing right there. You can actually hold the gun in your strong hand, put pressure on that button, and lock the bolt to the rear. Look at that. And that's super duper useful for, you know, unload and show clear and make ready in the pistol sports. So it just makes that process a lot easier and is a feature that I found I liked a lot. Like, I can't believe that nobody else does that, because that's really useful. You're doing it, you know, a couple times per stage, and it just makes it nicer for a right-handed shooter. Now, the price you pay for that functionality is the bolt release is a little bit higher on the right-hand side of the pistol. It's still easy to get at, it's still easy to use, but realistically, you're going to be locking the bolt to the rear many more times in the match than you are going to be wanting to drop the bolt in a hurry. That was a major quality of life improvement that I really liked about the rifle. Similarly, it came with a vertical foregrip. Like, I can't show you what it looks like because I took it off as soon as the thing showed up, and now I don't know where it is, but here's a stock image of what it looks like. So if you want a vertical foregrip, it comes with one. It comes way out at the end too, which was kind of strange. Like, it probably would get moved back by pretty much everybody. And a little bit of foreshadowing, it comes with a mil-spec flash hider, which is an interesting choice for a competition gun, and a mil-spec trigger. You can look at that there. It is not an amazing trigger. We'll talk about that more in the negatives. So how the gun shoots is it's a little bit heavier recoiling than the MPX. It's not a lot more. Honestly, I was expecting it to be more for being a blowback PCC, because I've shot other blowback PCCs like the Scorpion, and they just hit in the shoulder pretty hard. This doesn't do that. I think it has a lot to do with that buffer that they have there, and they've kind of optimized the bolt. We'll get into more of that here in a bit. This is 4 20-yard bill drills. Looks like my dot is a little bit off, but I mean, that's as fast as I can pull the trigger at 20 yards. That's not too bad. But it actually is pretty nice shooting. You're not going to be able to rip doubles like, you know, 0.9 splits on it and getting it to introduce the, like the bump fire with the mil-spec trigger without a lot of practice. I wasn't able to kind of figure it out, but the good news is it takes standard AR trigger components, so you can swap it out for your favorite system. There is a weird sort of springy sound when you're behind the rifle. You can kind of hear it there. And it's very observable when you're shooting it. It doesn't like do anything. It's just there's like a sprawling sound as you're shooting, which is kind of weird, something I noticed. The magwell, as we discussed, could be bigger for a competition rifle. It just isn't quite, you know, what you would want to really kind of jam reloads on the clock. It's a good attempt without making the lower receiver super duper wide from a piece of large billet, but at the same time, it's not bad. So I do want to talk about the drawbacks of this particular gun. This was sent to me by the folks at Daniel Defense. It doesn't change what I'm about to say. I just kind of lay it out there, and hopefully they're not too upset about it. But I do like the rifle. I think it is a good rifle, but let's kind of get into it. Now, this is not hitting the same price point as like a JP, which would be like, I don't know, 3.5 racks, where this is just, you know, about 50 short of 2 racks. And for those dads who are out of the slang game, rack is equal to about 1,000. So now you know what that means. You learned something today. So the trigger on a competition rifle needs to be much better. Now, this is not hitting the same price point as like a JP, so the trigger may not be what you want, but that's easily remedied and you can make it kind of how you'd like it. Why are you making a direct blowback gun in 2025? I guess really this was announced in 24, but here we are in 2025 and we're just getting hands on it. And I asked specifically to speak with the design engineer and we had an interesting conversation. So first and foremost, they wanted to make a direct blowback variant of the gun because it is the most reliable. And if you look at the bolt, there's no moving parts other than the extractor kind of pivoting over the case and it just blows straight back. It can run really, really dirty, like super duper dirty. It doesn't require a lot of maintenance. While the MPX does want to be cleaned, this thing doesn't really care. I don't know what the round count is on it. I didn't actually clean it. I wiped the bolts down when I pulled it to video it, but I just kind of oiled it and got back into it. It's somewhere north of 1,000 rounds. I don't know what the round count is. But talking to that design engineer and thinking about the rifles you see go down at the pistol matches you attend, the most common failure that is catastrophic and takes a rifle out of the game is when the case head separates, the walls of the cartridge stay in the chamber, and the gun won't run, and it's just a total pain in the butt to get that brass out. So asking that question, he said, yes, that is a problem, but usually when you see that, it's when people are messing with the buffer and bolt weight. They spent a lot of time testing different configurations of bolt and buffer mass to figure out what needed to happen. They said around 20 ounces is sort of the sweet spot, and they actually increased the weight of their bolt to use that kin shot without adding a weight to it to get that 20 ounce. So the bolt actually weighs about 17 ounces, which when you have it in hand, it's absolutely a little porker. The other big failure point for a rifle is going to end up being the bolt catch on a blowback gun because it has that heavy bolt slamming back and forth. And the bolt catch on this is done out of steel in that little module mag catch, bolt catch assembly. And you can see kind of a roll pin right there that helps retain this pack. So if the bolt catch ever were to go, it's easy to swap it out and get it back into operation. So realizing it's not some sort of delayed system like the JP, you know, it does as well as it can do for a blowback. And honestly, it shoots really nice. But let's talk about the flash hider decision. Just from an optics standpoint, you would assume that you would want like some kind of break for a 9mm, but his answer when I asked him that question, this will be interesting actually for you pistol guys, is that out of a 16-inch gun, there really isn't enough gas coming off the 9mm cartridge to do anything with a brake, which I've observed to be kind of true on my MPX PCC with a brake. It's not like a gassier load works the brake harder, like they all shoot basically the same. And he's like, there's not a lot that's gonna happen. But he said this, which was interesting. About 70 to 80% of the recoil impulse for a rifle comes from the propellant or the gunpowder converting into smoke that is used. And on a pistol cartridge, it's about 70 to 80% is from the projectile leaving the barrel because so little propellant is used, which means there's just not a lot of gas to work a brake or a compensator. On a pistol, obviously that's a different situation, but on a PCC with a 20-ounce bolt buffer assembly, it's not going to change a lot. So probably the biggest drawback about the blowback system is that, you know, the kind of guys who are spending this kind of money on a PCC are usually gadget guys. If you shoot a lot of matches, you meet these guys, they've got like used car money in their rifle bag between the rifles and accessories they're running around with. And those guys tend to view the bearing delayed systems as being kind of superior. It is the kind of like front end of the system as far as pushing the design of PCCs forward. So like there's just, you know, a blowback gun this late in the game isn't necessarily something that those kinds of guys are going to get excited about. So the kind of person who's looking for a blowback gun generally is going to either fall into two buckets. They're the super high-end spenders who is shooting pistol matches with rifles typically. And then there is the person who wants to spend the least amount of money possible and is buying like the Kel-Tec or Ruger PCC kind of stuff. Like those are kind of the two things. So like this is firmly positioned in the middle. It's, you know, just over halfway to what a JP costs, but it's also like 2x what like a, you know, 1K sort of option getting into the space would be. So the question is like, is the market there for sort of this midsection that kind of comes in there? Because it is a lot of money. I don't think that you're losing performance to those systems. I mean, with a trigger swap, I think you would have a rifle that would play nicely in the division just beautifully, and somebody's going to make a magwell for it eventually. I just know it. So that remains to be seen. I can say, again, I really like how the gun shoots. I mean, you can do the super fast splits pretty well with the stock trigger in there. I would be enhanced with the trigger swap, as we have said. But, you know, everything else is great. The gun just handles beautifully. I really like how the gun swings, how the gun does pretty much everything, the controls, the safety. The stock is brilliant. I like the rubberized stuff on the grip. It provides good traction without kind of tearing up your hand any. Handguard's nice, although I'd probably want to add some like skate tape to it or something like that. And you really have a really solid player sort of right out of the box. So that is the Daniel Defense PCC with the 16-inch barrel. Sound off in the comments with any questions you have, and I'll see if I can't answer them. As always, I appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.